Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
Welcome back to another edition of Liberty with Love. I am your host, Robin Koerner, and it is a pleasure to have you with me as always. And as I am looking at the software tick by here, I see that I am not loud enough. So let me turn this up. I am back home after a very interesting week where I went to the Netroots conference in Atlanta. Netroots being one of the, if not the biggest progressive, big capital P there, progressive conference in America. And it was an education. I was there with a number of friends and colleagues doing work. And what I saw and heard at Netroots, which is, as I say, a huge conference, so we're talking about 2,000 or 3,000 people who identify, on the left politically, really showed me that American politics, I was going to say, is on a slippery slope, but I don't even know what the right metaphor is. Suffice to say that I think things are a lot worse than I realized they were before I got on that plane to go to Atlanta. And there's a lot that I'm going to be saying about that, I think, probably over the next weeks, over the next months, maybe on the show, maybe on video, maybe in writing. But I talked to some of my friends and colleagues who were there about what we were seeing at Netroots from a lot of these folks on the left. And certainly these are the folks that identify, many of them, as SJWs, and my listeners and readers know that I've been talking more about social justice warriors and the cultural left and the illiberal left and all of this recently. But I got like on the inside of it in Atlanta last week. And although, as I say, I will be, I'm sure, saying lots about it, I have brought on the show today a friend of mine, a gentleman called Brandon. Well, you know what, Brandon? Welcome to the show. Let me start by asking you to tell my listeners why it is that you can say some of the things about what you and I saw at Netroots that I can't say.
First off, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be able to share it because we're actually getting to say things that cannot be said, although many people observe it, because of a racial rift, blah, 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 blah. Basically what it means is you can't say that because you're white, Robin.
What can't I say?
You can't say.
I can't talk about race?
You can't say, wow, this Black Lives Matter movement sounds a lot like the white supremacy movement. And even some of the things they say, right. Say that was like, but you can't say that because then they'll say you're a racist. But they can't say that to me because I'm black. And it was like,
and there you go. So you're my official black friend, right? So every white boy needs one, right?
You do. But no. And I found this out. I didn't want to have to say this at Netroots, but it required a qualifier because most people won't mention this in the coming out of the black community, which does not exist. It's not a place. It's just it. But it's not enough because you could be what they consider an Uncle Tom or a sellout, i.e. Tiger Woods. Well, after you're not successful, it requires a certain amount of qualifier in the sense that you have to prove that you've come from essentially the black diaspora. So it's not enough to say you have a black friend. You have to say, and you can.
Oh, I know that.
That was like, my black friend was raised in the inner city of Chicago. If they want streets for those of you that are from Chicago, West Side Till the World Blows Up, that you should be able to get that. Then also Garfield and Humboldt Park, by way of Central Park and Grand. That's a Vice Lord and Latin King neighborhood. For those of you that understand the gang rhetoric, but that way they can understand that this opinion is born out of the poverty and
right.
the absolute social failure that they say that the Black Lives Matter movement claims is being overlooked.
And just to be clear for anybody who missed that, what you've just described there is where you come from, Brandon, right?
It's proud of it. It's where it's where I come from.
Now, just so like folks know what that means, I seem to remember you saying something like, and correct me if I got this wrong, something like you saw murder before you could drive.
Absolutely. It's a normal thing, and it's one of those things that the police, for instance, the pizza man doesn't come to our neighborhood. It's not just a song. The police didn't come. When I first was able to recall, people were blowing up mailboxes, and when the police would come to, of course, fill out a report, they would shoot the police. This was back in the early 90s. I'm very familiar with what it's like to be in that position and in those places where it's the type of poverty and the type of crime that is so abnormal to most, but it goes on.
And so, just so I'm clear, would you call your neighborhood 100% black? Would you call it? I mean, I know you've got some Hispanic in you, so your black Hispanic mix. Was your neighborhood mix similarly?
The way the neighborhood worked, they're basically essentially ghettos. Where I lived, everything south of Division Street was very black. It was almost 100% black. If we saw a white person there, we would ask them if they were lost.
Okay, so you wouldn't kill them.
Well, no, of course not. You just rob them.
Seriously, right?
That way they, not that I robbed them. But then right south of Division Street was almost heavily Puerto Rican. And actually that area, Humboldt Park, is one of the highest concentrations of Puerto Ricans in the world. So they're divides. Like you cross the street and it's one thing to the next. But that's where I was. It's heavily minority.
And they were and these neighborhoods, these contiguous neighborhoods, were they all gang dominated?
Absolutely.
Okay. So just to be clear, the reason we're talking about this is what became evident to both of us at Netroots is that the identity politics has gone, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but basically as far as it seems that it can go. And, it really, the content of what you had to say mattered not much to most of them. What mattered was the, strangely, amount of melanin in the skin on the face of that was speaking the words. There was a lot of that at Netroots, right?
Absolutely.
Now, I've got this show, I've got a platform, so I can talk about it for months, and I will. But I want to give you this 3/4 of an hour. Tell my audience, we've got, 3 minutes to set this up in this segment. What did you see? Is there anything different now in that you saw at Netroots than you might expect to see from folks 5 or 10 years ago, or even from folks of a similar, standing on a similar part of the political spectrum 5 or 10 years ago?
I think that America has been very quick to be blind about the fact that this is that the amount of hatred it's been there for a long time.
Hatred from whom to whom?
From black to white. And from basically black to anyone at this point.
Okay.
It's something that's been held behind. It's been kept behind closed doors, but a couple of factors really play a big part in why the Black Lives Matter movement. One, I think, started with a good intent, and the hatred there kind of took over. I think that first off, I told a couple of them, and I have no problem telling them. was like it was bad marketing. It was initially it should have been, if it was really about police brutality, then they should have stuck to that and said all lives matter. And we are incorporated in all lives. But
okay, so let me play devil's advocate here, because obviously the comeback on that, and a lot of people have said that, but a lot of people come back is on that with but there's a concentration of the problem that we being black that are interested in, which concerns black people. And if you look at the criminal justice thing, there's certainly an imbalance there. It's as legitimate to say Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter as it is to wear, a cure cancer motif on your on your jacket. That doesn't mean you don't care about people with heart disease, right? That's the answer to that. And on the surface, that seems pretty reasonable, no?
I'm gonna go with no. I mean, it sounds reasonable on the surface, but that if it's not the true heart intent, then I disagree. No.
Okay, we will talk more about this. This is Robin Koerner. This is Liberty with Love. I'm speaking to Brandon Flies. This is Robin Koerner. I am touching the touchy subject of race and racism in the United States, and to be safe, well, not that safe. I'm doing it with my white boy's token black friend. That's not quite true, of course. I have a bunch of black friends. Do I have to say that? Is it pathetic to say that? I don't know. This is America. I don't know anymore. But Brandon, we went into the end of the last segment, and so we were at the end of the last segment, and you said that you didn't buy the argument that it's perfectly reasonable to have a group named Black Lives Matter that emphasizes the protection of black lives against, systemic problems that we have in the United States. So what's wrong with that?
The big problem with it is, first, it's selfish. It cordones off a group and says that it can only happen to these people. I'm not saying that black lives don't matter. I'm saying that was like, I'm black and Mexican. I'm half and half. Okay. So does that mean that if I have a cousin that experiences the same thing in a similar in a similar neighborhood, or in an affluent neighborhood for that matter, it doesn't matter? Does it mean that?
I'll push you on this, because no, that's not that. Name Black Lives Matter doesn't say it doesn't matter any more than I say I care about cancer says that people with heart disease don't matter.
No. But if you care about cancer, that's encompassing all of the cancers.
Maybe I care about lung cancer because my dad died of lung cancer, and that's what I give my money to. That's cool.
It is cool, but we're talking about a human issue, and when we're talking about humans in general,
cancer's about humans.
Say again.
Lung cancer. I care about it because it kills humans. It hurts humans.
It does kill humans, and that means that cancer is a problem. Just because it's lung cancer doesn't necessarily mean that testicular cancer isn't an issue.
No, right. But it's in the name, right? What I'm saying is, this right here is an issue, because a lot of folks that have an instinctive reaction against Black Lives Matter say exactly that. It should be all lives matter. But yes, it should, and we're going to get into the fact that all lives do matter. But I don't think by naming your group Black Lives Matter, you're saying that all lives don't. Because go ahead.
And I told him this was like, it's a marketing failure. It's not that that's not true. I totally agree with that. But it encompasses more. And for the issue that it wasn't a matter of they're just killing black people, because that's not the case. That's a false statement. Was like the police abuse of power. It's all encompassing. It's all encompassing. And to say it's just us, and someone say, well, I agree, but it also affects me too. To not have the presence of mind to say this could be affecting anyone else shows that there's a lack of concern. And so then you have to look at the root of where that lack of concern comes from. And the root of the lack of concern is from a disenfranchised group of people. True, I totally agree with that. I've lived it.
Yes.
Was like, but it does not mean that my wife, if she's not of African American or black or whatever makes you feel good this year descent, that she didn't experience that, hasn't experienced that exact same thing while being a different race. Yeah, and so for that reason was like, it's something that was like, and I told him it's not that their heart intent at the inception wasn't bad. What was bad, it's that they didn't think beyond the fact that was like, how can you get people on board if you say first Black Lives Matter, but it means everybody, but then, and maybe I'm jumping the shark here, but then you say, if you're a person of color, then you can be a part of this meeting. But if you're not, you've got to get out. Was like,
right. So that's really what inspired. And now we're getting. That's what inspired this show, right?
Did I jump the shark?
Say again. No. You're right to bring it up because really, to me, you can be Black Lives Matter, and that can be completely fine if you have that. If you have an open attitude, if you have a humane attitude. The thing that frightened me at Netroots that I had never seen before. Is that it is explicitly that the Black Lives Matter folks, but not only them, this isn't a show just about Black Lives Matter. This is a show about identitarian politics that I experienced in spades at that progressive conference. Race and ethnicity just being one, domain in which that plays out. But yes, it was those, I was in a room of 1,000 or 2,000 people and some folks representing Black Lives Matter. That's what they said. They said, we are doing X, Y, Z. We only invite people of color. And if you are not a person of color, you need to understand why we need to do this. And it was very interesting because whilst there are always, particular interest groups, some with better intent than others, some motivated by, a civic mindset, and some motivated by race, and some motivated by ethnicity or whatever it may be. What was different about this, to me, was that the rhetoric from the stage to 1,000 people of all ethnicities was openly, overtly belligerent. It was overtly exclusionary, which was kind of really interesting because, what we've got here is a rhetoric an intent to divide and separate out, dressed up in a rhetoric of unity. It sounds like unity, but the actual words they're saying is, if you're white, you're not invited. And then saying, in not so many words, you must comply. You white people, you must comply. And these words are coming from folks who are carrying slogans or wearing slogans that actually say things like no justice, no peace. Now, when somebody's telling you that the justice they're talking about is their version of justice, and it's founded on, and I also was told this, and I had a long conversation with this with an activist, that is a justice based on a very strange, as it happened in this case, interpretation of history, whereby the redress involves the violent taking of things from some people and giving it to other people identified by the amount of melanin in their skin. Then when somebody says to you, no justice, no peace, but you don't get a say in what justice looks like, that's a threat. That's a threat. And I came away from that opening ceremony where I witnessed some of this. It wasn't the only time at the conference when I witnessed this, but it was the first time I witnessed it. And I came away and I said to another friend that I was in there with, this is the first time during my involvement in American politics that I feel scared for my physical safety. And by the way, I should just say this was before the events in Virginia. There were people with T-shirts saying, punch more Nazis. I don't like Nazis. I don't want to be anywhere near a Nazi, but I'm not sure I want the guy who wants to punch somebody telling me who the Nazi is, especially if I know that all his friends have been calling anybody that doesn't agree with him on pretty much everything a Nazi. And so that's where we are now, right? It's the words are violent, they're overtly threatening, and everybody else is being told, if you're not with us, you're against us. And my God, all I could think of was, this is George Bush in Iraq. Here we are, and 9/11 rather. And it ain't pretty. It's is this an eye for an eye making the world blind? That's where we're coming from here, right?
I think that was like, even saying, is this George Bush in Iraq might be a little bit soft. I look as a minority and I say, is this the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan of the 40s? Was like, because I having come off of Netroots and seeing, the news reports of what happened in Virginia and not really being able to stop and actually look. When I got home, I did, because of course we had our conversations, and I had, and I think we all had ours as to the experiences that we had as far as how identity politics have become bigger and then race relations have become much more tense. Was like my first thought was, are we really living this? Are we really are we really in a place to where we're so afraid to say that was like this Black Lives Matter, what it's turned into, and it may not be everyone that's involved, but for what we've seen in Virginia, what we've seen in the conversation at Netroots, you have to ask yourself, was like, how I need someone to explain to me how this is any different than the Aryan Nation.
Yeah, I think you're getting to a big point here, which is why, if white nationalism isn't acceptable, why is black nationalism or any other kind of nationalism acceptable? We're going to break. In 2011, Robin Koerner wrote the article that launched the biggest coalition for Ron Paul's presidential run, called Blue Republican. Now, Stairway Press is pleased to announce the publication of his first book, If You Can Keep It, Why We Nearly Lost It and How We Get It Back. Jeffrey Tucker, who wrote the foreword, says brilliant ideas come in effervescent packages. This is a good description of Robin Koerner's provocative work. It's a work of stunning erudition and sincerity. I also happen to agree with it. I've been struggling toward a similar thesis for a good part of my writing career, though I'm certain Robin has gone beyond even my most mature thought. His section on liberty as a realization of a civilization of love truly sweeps me away with its insight and depth. I know that time is short and that people don't read as carefully as they should, but this section deserves close study by every advocate of liberty. It will change the way you think and speak about the topic. We need this book now. Pre-order your personally signed copy of If You Can Keep It at ifyoucankeepit.us. So, Brandon, let me ask that question again. If white nationalism is not acceptable and is threatening, and that seems like a pretty reasonable proposition to me, I don't think there's any such thing as a sensible nationalism, why is black nationalism or other minority nationalisms, if you like, why is that acceptable? Why is it acceptable enough that we can, a lot of folks can just put out in public that that's what they believe in? Nationalism, in other words, separation, it's a form of, I guess it's racial segregation, right? Why is it, and why is it that the rest of the country is, no, not the rest of the country, that many folks who actually are potentially going to be hurt by this kind of segregation and racism, why are they bending over backwards to accept it or take it? What's going on? Make sense of this for me. As someone who comes from that community, who's part of that community, help me understand it.
Because they're afraid to be American.
What does that mean?
Anyone that accepts that type of thinking is afraid to say the very things that made us American, that stood up and said, we want freedom and we want to be able to live freely and express our ideas, but also to allow others to do so. That's the exact opposite, and the reason that happens is because people live, and I pick with my white friends about it, but it's the truth. It's a certain amount of guilt that doesn't need to exist anymore. Was like at some point we have to say that things are wrong, and that when we see something that's wrong, black nationalism should never be accepted. But people have become so weak that they're not willing to say, America is supposed to be a melting pot. If you want to be a separatist, then they have tickets at Southwest, and I'm told that Delta on international flights will give you free Wi-Fi so you can carry your ass away to some place that you would rather be if you want to separate so badly. Save the money from your Netroots ticket and go there. Because for those of us because here's what's happening. People that want to be accepting don't want to say to these people, hey, that's hateful. Okay. Because they don't want to step on anyone's toes. But the fact of the matter is that I do relate to the angst that comes from black people feeling like, yes, there is a system that's set up to control you. Yes, it has not been addressed. Yes, it does hurt people. And yes, you are targeted to some degree and to a major degree. I experience that on a regular. I totally get it. But doing what people do, but doing what hate mongers have done is not the answer. I look at Charlottesville as a prime example. Those people were exercising the white nationalists were exercising their right to be able to speak. There was no reason for Black Lives Matter and every other group to show up and protest a demonstration. There are a lot of ways that they could have done it and been nonviolent. And for me, if you're looking to create a solution, you have to look to create a solution, not cause trouble. And so I look at that and I say, it's not acceptable. Two, was like the only reason that it continues to go on is because the same reason that every white person says, oh, I don't like the sound of the N-word. I don't like the sound of the N-word. Was like it doesn't matter if you like the sound of the N-word. You give it power by being afraid of it. You give it power by being afraid of black people. Because the question you ask them as a black nationalist, well, what do you want? What do you want? Do you want 40 acres and a fucking mule? You want to work in the sun? Is that what you want? Was like, well, what do you want? It was like, and the sad truth of it is that like they're angry, and it comes to there are a lot of socioeconomic failures that come from that. Was like the schools are bad because you've been raised in societies where you haven't been able to get the education. I understand that. And unbeknownst to many, it's taken years and years to be able to get to level for me. So I get that, but promoting hatred and wrapping it as unity doesn't work. And that was the last conversation that I had with my mother before we realized we couldn't even speak. So it's a very personal matter for me. And I look at this and I go, that's the separation in America. The separation in America is that people aren't willing to say, was like, hey, you do realize you guys sound a lot like the Aryan Nation.
Now, so Brandon, you did have this, or versions of this, or pieces of this conversation with some of the folks at Netroots, right? You actually got to this with some of them.
Absolutely.
Some black and some white, right? I think, yeah. Okay, so tell me how some of those, what kind of reactions did you get? What arguments did you get back when you kind of went there?
Well, the first thing was a qualifier, because first they talk to you and they say, okay, you're black, I'm black, so we should be on the same page, right, my brother, right, my brother. And then my response is that like, no, I totally disagree. And I totally disagree with that. And then, well, I mean, like, where are you from? And then it becomes a matter of like that, which is why at the beginning of this, I wanted to explain where I'm from, because
you get points for coming from a worse back. That's what it is. Your veracity, your moral authority is a function of how bad you had it, right? That's what's being established here. It's the kind of like inverse pissing competition.
Exactly. And the strange part of that, the reasoning behind that is because then it gives credibility for somebody that may, for instance, I'm not, if somebody says I'm from Alexandria, Virginia, and he goes, and so this is why it's important to me. So where are you from? Then I say, well, I'm from the west side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. And he goes, Chicago or the suburbs? Why? Because then it says, was like, no, I'm from the crime side. Was like, I'm from the west side, just east of K-Town. Do your math. Was like, okay. So that's why I disagree with you, because was like, while you're marching, you're not getting permits. If you're pissed off about the cops getting you, was like the last thing I would do. Everyone was so excited about the girl standing in the middle of the street, and it was, look at this picture, and they put it on Facebook, and there was a picture, an iconic picture of a girl standing in the middle of the street, and I'm looking and saying, was like, if you had a permit in a park the way, I don't know, the white nationalists did, then you would be able to peacefully demonstrate. You would have been able to do what Martin Luther King did. But you're not doing that. You're putting that person, all those people, in harm's way, and you're almost setting up the police to have to get you. And then when you resist and they exert any force, which, by the way, I'm not a fan of the police at all, was like, or brutality, I should say. I was like, you're putting them in a position where they have to do that, and then the cameras come out, and then there's this flock of people saying that, oh man, look at what they're doing to these people. Was like, no. If you push somebody, and you put yourself in that position to create that, to create a narrative that allows you to be the victim, then yeah, you're gonna get that response. But that's exactly what it is, and the responses that I get from these people. It was always the same. yeah, I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. I was like, that's because I know where you come from. I know what you're doing, and I've seen it done a million times. It's a hustle, and it's psychological. You're working off of the sympathies and the fears of people that openly know, I have no idea what you've been through, and you're milking it. It's no different than when a wife says, my husband's had a really hard day at work, when really he doesn't do shit at work. And so he doesn't say, no, I didn't have a hard day at work. It wasn't that. I pitched a total shutout. I didn't do shit. And she still gives him a beer and makes his dinner, but he didn't do shit. Was like, and that's what's happening. Black Lives Matter is taking that, and they're saying that, yeah, it's been really, really tough on us. It's been really, really tough on us, but not doing anything and taking every concession that
okay,
that
so
white
tell me
America
more
will
about
give.
that, because just to be clear here, I am letting you roll because I'm learning, and you have a background that gives you a perspective that I can never have. And I was like you at Netroots. I haven't gone and read everything that happened in Virginia and that whole thing. So I'm just letting you go, which is cool. But I want to ask you, okay, then, if that's so, then what's the way forward? Give me the positive. If they're doing it all wrong, what should it be instead? And answer that in a way that recognizes that anything that you say, that anybody could say back to you, we tried that and it failed, that's what they're going to say back to you. So you got to come up with something better than invites that.
Absolutely. First off, dear Black Lives Matter, I totally understand. I do. I dare say, for anyone that bothers to look, I have been a victim of the exact same things. If you want to involve people, and you want and your goal is to be able to be recognized and treated the same as every other citizen, then take Black Lives Matter and hashtag all lives matter, but you do it on your terms. And let's use a mock scenario. Let's use one that we've already touched. Let's take Charlottesville. Instead of everyone showing up to protest a demonstration, instead of doing that, use your Facebook Live, which is probably how you got the following you got in the first place, and use that Facebook Live with every Black Lives Matter chapter, now an All Lives Matter chapter, and incorporate the things that you want to share that are positive, that speak to what you would like to see. We've never heard what they'd like to see. Was like, let's hear what you'd like to see.
I want to know. I think you asked a great question that you just shared on this show a few minutes ago, where you said, what do you want? Like, what actually do you want? Because if you want a nation, if you're a nationalist inside a nation, what's the end game? Do you know what the end game is? Did you get an answer to that question from anybody?
The one black nationalist that I spoke to and asked him was like, what is it? Well, I mean, where do you want to go? He's like, no, we want rights. Was like, then I don't know if that's a black nationalist. That's more of a civil rights thing. Yeah. And it was a stammering, stuttering response to it, and I was like, I'll be honest with you, dude. I don't want to leave here. Was like, I mean, I understand.
So who's leading them so wrong? Because it's completely obvious that the words "we want equal rights," whatever it may be, for people of color, like anybody. I mean, apart from the whack job Nazi types, everybody's going to sign up to that. Everybody wants that. Everybody's wants to make that happen in this country. All the good people I know, wherever they are across the political spectrum, that's not even controversial. So given that you've got this whole rich substrate to draw on for support, why would you be using words that mean the exact opposite? Why would you be saying and putting across your T-shirts and putting on your placards this separatist, physically threatening, nationalist, essentially racist? And I use that word advisedly because, we were told explicitly from the stage that if you were white, you were excluded from what these people were doing. Why would they think that's anything other than the opposite of what they really want, which is inclusivity, which is civil rights, whatever? Is it because there's a hardcore that don't really want those things? They want power. That they want maybe the ego trip. Maybe, well, I don't know. What is it? Is it that?
Absolutely. That's what I perceive from it. And I think the worst part of it is that as long as people allow it to continue to go on unchecked, not questioning it, that's what happens. It's a pull for power. It was like, and it's dangerous. Not only is it dangerous, but but nobody's stopped to ask them. Black Lives Matter. What do you want? Was like, because my thought is if you wanted, because first off was like, if Black Lives Matter was essentially about stop killing black people, we want police to stop killing black people. I think that was what it started out as. Why are you in Charlottesville in the first place? Why are you in Charlottesville in the first place? I've always been of the predication even from where I'm from. If someone's from some place that's tougher, that they have a different kind of operating mirandi. But if you see something that you don't need to be a part of, that has nothing to do with your goals, you should not even be there.
So again, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Maybe somebody could say, look, it was a success because our being there and what happened shone the light on the nastiness of the white supremacists, and the evil that is on that side in this country. Is that legit? Is that useful? I mean, certainly.
That's not their goal.
Well, maybe it is now. Maybe that's the. Is that maybe?
Also, we're forgetting about all the Black Lives that matter, all the people that were killed by police officers. That we're going to drop.
I'm going to keep playing the devil's advocate. Maybe more Black lives are under threat because of those folks who they shone the light on, those white supremacists in Virginia and elsewhere. Maybe that's a more fundamental approach to their goal. Maybe.
And you mean the white supremacists that say we're not about hate, we just want to we don't like them and we want to separate, and we're going back to wherever we are in Ruby Ridge. Those guys, the ones that worked really hard to stay away, the ones that got the permits and had the police protection to be able to gather for their demonstration, and we're looking to stay away. It doesn't make sense, because here's if Black Lives Matter has broaden their scope, and they say what we want to do now is we want to raise awareness about hatred, then why do you have Punch More Nazi shirts? Why are you there?
Yeah, well, that's to my simplistic mind, that's the question. If it's against, if you don't want hatred, if you do want inclusivity, if you do want equality, why are all the slogans the opposite?
And here's the thing. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of a Bill Burr thing where he's talking about an argument. Bill Burr's a comedian, for those that don't know. Fantastic. And he's talking about when you're in an argument and you stay on topic, that's how you win it. Like they'll give you less stuff from the left, stuff from the right. But if you stay on topic, they throw that stuff, you just talk because you've already won. Black Lives Matter is right now that girl, that soon-to-be ex-girlfriend that's just throwing stuff left and right and not addressing the topic that they originally came out to address, and that's the problem.
You have such a way with words, my friend. You really do. Yeah, that's interesting. We're going into the final break. This has gone very fast, this show. Thank you, Brandon. We'll be back soon.
It's a pleasure.
Hey, Brandon, this has gone faster than just about any show I've done in a long time. And we've only got 2.5 minutes now as the show comes to the end, the final segment. So look, 2.5 minutes, man. If there's anything else you want to say, you say it.
My thought is that for noble causes, which Black Lives Matter started out as, couple of tips. Make it all lives matter, because they all do, including ours. And I say that as a minority black male. But also Mexicans, also whites, also everybody. There's no way I could cover that in 2.5 minutes. But all of you matter, period, as humans. Next thing, if you want to exact change, use the things that matter. What would have been awesome is in a place like Charlottesville, if you're sympathetic, don't go to work. If you're sympathetic, close your business while these people are here. Don't support it, but
what,
also
you mean why the white right-wingers are there, right? You can protest by closing down. Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly. Utilize your resources and think of of humans as a whole, because Black lives are human lives, as are white lives, as are all lives. The fact that we're continuing to do the same thing and reciprocating hatred is wrong. One thing that I found in the Bible was like, if you can't do something out of love, don't do it. And as long as we're operating out of hatred and pointing at the other person, we'll never be able to fix the things that we need to, because we're constantly fighting against someone else and not looking to create solutions. It's exhausting, and it cost someone their life, and that was unnecessary, and it's going to continue to happen as long as we continue to do unnecessary things. Do Black Lives Matter? Yes. Do all lives matter? Yes. It's a human issue. It's not just a race issue, and as long as we make it one, we're going to continue to see this type of hatred everywhere. Black people, we should do better. Martin Luther King died for nothing if this is what we've become.
That's a big statement.
I believe it. I'm in Atlanta when I say that, too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big statement. Brandon, you've given me food for thought, and I'm sure a load of the listeners, and thanks for discussing this with me. This is Liberty with Love. My name is Robin Koerner. Check out my stuff on robinkoerner.com. Check out the book if you can keep it. I'll talk to you again, Brandon. Thanks a lot, mate. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
If you appreciated this episode of Liberty with Love with Robin Koerner, then please go ahead and like it, subscribe to my channel, and maybe check out one of the other episodes like this one here.